Welcome back to the Left of Old North. I'm your host, Adrian.
And I'm CJ.
And today we are going to be taking a look at a bunch of different things. It always seems like something new is happening every single day in politics, especially in North Carolina. There's always some new development, and I swear it doesn't feel normal right now.
Not at all. Not at all.
But we're here to try and capture a little slice of it. So first up, just want to say at the back half of this podcast, we got to sit down with Mayor Pro Tem of Boone, North Carolina, progressive Democrat and 25-year-old Dalton George. So be sure to stick around for that. I think it was a really great interview.
Oh yeah, no, it was. I mean, and you know what? It is our first one here on Left of Old North, so
yeah.
It should be
hopefully the first of many.
Oh yeah.
So, but first, and unfortunately, as what seems to be always in North Carolina news right now, we've got to talk about Riggs versus Griffin.
God.
The most incredible ego-soothing campaign that I have seen in a long, long time, not since 2020, with the dregs of the Trump campaign. So where are we at right now, CJ?
So let me just preface all of this by saying that this is apparently the only race across the entire country that is not done, that was held back. Only one that's not done, right? And so it's the campaign, it's the election that will never end. But we did have just a recent development, I believe it was yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, yesterday, February 7th. And it is when a Wake County judge in Wake County Superior Court ruled against Griffin, saying that essentially the Wake County Board of Elections were right to rule the way they did against him.
Right.
And of course, as of recording, to my knowledge, there hasn't been any announcement of an appeal, but I would be willing to bet a lot that he's going to appeal it. He's going to try to appeal it to like circuit court, regional court, whatever it is. And the ultimate goal is to end up in North Carolina Supreme Court, where Griffin has some besties.
Yeah, his potential, if everything goes his way, his 5 Republican buddies on the Supreme Court may be able to shake loose a win for him. Now, that's not a guarantee. Maybe cooler heads will prevail. Let's just say we're not super optimistic about this 5-2 split. And keep in mind that Justice Riggs has already recused herself from any involvement with this case if it does go up to the North Carolina Supreme Court.
And you want to know what? Sorry, no, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but you want to know why she recused herself? Because she has integrity,
right,
which Griffin does not have.
Yeah. And far be it from us to assume outright that Republicans do have integrity, when time and time again they have done their damnedest to prove they don't. It's almost like a challenge. It's almost like a challenge. It's like, you think we can't go lower? Watch us. And it really is sad, especially when you still hear some Democrats, both statewide and national, calling for bipartisanship with the very people who are trying to undermine our elections from the inside. Not through, whether it's through a violent coup like they did on January 6th, or whether it's through a coup with Elon Musk just straight up taking over the passwords at the Treasury Department with his gaggle of 20-somethings.
One of which is named Big Balls, apparently.
I don't...
Hold on, handle.
I have not been following that one closely enough, but CJ, you go right ahead.
Unfortunately, I read that earlier, and I really miss who I was before I read it. One of his cronies apparently goes by the name Big Balls online. It's so stupid, and it's proof we just live in absolute dumbest timeline. Yeah,
some people say that Harambe being shot was the trigger event that separated us from the good timeline. And you know what? I'm inclined to believe them. Anyway, we're getting way off track.
Yeah, I agree with that. But so one of the big stories with this whole Riggs-Griffin case is the fact that this revolves around 600,000 challenge votes. Now, again, remember
60,000.
60,000. Sorry, way off there.
Yeah,
60,000 challenge votes.
if they could get away with 600,000, they probably would.
60,000 challenge vote. And Adrian, I believe you had a little bit of experience with this today.
Yeah, so as part of a push to make sure that the people who are being targeted as part of the 60 to 65,000 voters that they want to take off of this election, just completely toss those ballots out. We've been going door to door. A bunch of us have been going door to door in my county to alert people and let them know, hey, do you know what's going on? And also, do you realize that your ballot is one of the ones being challenged? And I got to tell you, I talked with at least a dozen people today, and if anybody's done canvassing, you know that that's actually a pretty good result.
That's a really good result.
Like
wow.
12 people in one day. That's pretty good. But it was good. Everybody was very respectful, even the ones that were, not our party or anything like that. But the look on some of these people's faces when they fully realized that their votes were some of the ones being targeted. Like one woman, I mean, she seemed to hold it together, but she almost broke down crying in front of us because, and she told us a story that, I mean, and I'm not going to name names, obviously, because these people will be contacted by the NCDP or the media in their due time. I don't have to talk to them specifically on this one, but one story that I heard from a woman was that she had her kids with her all day, and she couldn't take them to school for whatever reason, and so she had to make sure that she could get off of work, she could pick up her kids from like a daycare or something, and that she could go and vote. And then to be told 3 months later by some 30-something-year-old guy walking around in her neighborhood that her vote might not count in the first place, that's kind of devastating. And the problem is that a lot of these Republicans don't actually see that the people that they're trying to throw out, they're real. They're real people. They're registered voters. They got out to the polls and they did their civic duty. And you want to shit all over that because your ego's been bruised. Because you can't believe that out of almost 5 million ballots, you came up short. Was it by a hair? Yeah, but you still came up short, Jeff. So own it, man. Like it's sad at this point. It really is. And it's even worse for the people who it's actually affecting, like these voters that I talked to today.
Yeah. And I mean, I think I've said this on here before. I think it just proves, this whole situation just proves that Republicans don't care about free and fair elections, which we knew that just from the, everything they've done over the past, say, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
But this takes it to a whole new level,
Right.
And part of me wonders if this is, in a way, a test case almost.
Oh, absolutely.
And, do
absolutely.
this, see how they can do this on a national level, see, what they like to do.
I think you had a great analogy for this that you told me the other day.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, thank you. So I was driving to an event the other day, and it hit me. For those of you who may not have ever seen Jurassic Park, like the original, 1993 version, one, pause this, watch it, come back, please, because you're missing out. Love that movie. Two, in the movie, one of the dinosaurs on the island is a pack of velociraptors, incredibly intelligent animals. They kind of become the main villains in my movie. So next to the hubris of man, so there's a scene early on before all hell breaks loose, where our main characters go to the raptor pen and just kind of take in the violence, the veracity that these animals have. And the gamekeeper, a guy by the name of Muldoon, talks about how the cage is electric. Now there's this one leader in the pack who's having the others throw themselves at the fence to test it for weakness systematically. And that's what's going on with the Republican Party right now. That's what you're seeing with executive orders, which we'll talk about here in a bit. It's what you're seeing with cases like this, things like the bill out in Tennessee that was trying to make it to where lawmakers could not vote in favor of a sanctuary city law. It would literally make it a felony for them to vote. These are all just little ways they're trying to test to see what the public will push back on, the Democratic Party as a whole will push back on, and what they can get away with. They are trying to see if they can get past that fence and run completely wild.
And so far, they have already found a few vulnerabilities, probably more than a few.
Yeah, most definitely.
Namely, that you can just attach anything to a so-called hurricane relief bill, and you can just pass whatever.
Yeah.
So, they are testing the fence. They are trying to break through. Jefferson Griffin's race is, I call it an ego-soothing, but it really is just one chess move in the game that they're trying to play.
Yeah.
And I think more people need to be aware of that, because like some of these people that I talked to today, they didn't realize that these judges serve for 8 years. In North Carolina, these Supreme Court justices serve for 8-year terms. They don't serve for life or anything like that. So, it's not going to be up on the next election. It's going to be 2 election cycles, like full-on presidential cycles, before we can get this guy out. And by that point, most people will have forgotten that this was ever a problem to begin with. So this is the kind of thing that we need to keep in the conversation. And if we don't, then people are going to forget.
No, they are. And we can't let, as a party, as people who care about democracy, as, people who care about the future of this country, but, this state, we can't let them forget.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be doing, our job. We wouldn't be doing our duty.
Right. And by the way, it's not just candidates that they're throwing at the fence to see what will get through. It's a lot of bills. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of bills that they know will either get a lot of attention and fail. Trump's kind of doing this with executive orders, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Here in North Carolina, we have no shortage of just bills that are kind of outrageous when you really read into it and you start to understand like what exactly, because like, okay, that let me put something out here, that when you read some of these bills, it's so innocuous, it feels so innocuous, it's just like, yes, okay, that's what they're proposing, got it. But then it's like, well, you put the pieces together, you put the puzzle pieces together, and you're like, oh shit, that's what they want to do. Like, this is real. They want. Okay, so CJ has a list of a bunch of these bills, and I want him to. I think that you are very good at kind of giving us a great summary of what these bills do, and I will give it in layman's terms.
Okay. Well, so first of all, I want everyone to know that any bill that is introduced by either the House or the Senate in the North Carolina General Assembly, you can look it up on the General Assembly's website. And I think people should do that because they should see what is on the docket, what is being discussed, what might be coming up for a vote very soon. And so this past week, we saw 3 big bills kind of come up, 2 in the House, 1 in the Senate. And we've already seen people like Anderson Clayton, the North Carolina Democratic Party chair, amplify these, talk about these a little bit. So these are big bills. So the first one, I'll just do the Senate. So this is Senate Bill 58, so S58. Again, you can look this up on the General Assembly website, NCLE.gov. So this, and I'm taking this summary from the UNC School Government website. This expands the legal proceedings the Attorney General is barred from participating in under General Statute 114-2.8 to include challenges that would invalidate an executive order issued by the President of the United States. So
in short,
huge.
In short, if Trump wants to just put out an executive order, they want to make it impossible for Attorney General Jeff Jackson to fight against it, to bring suits against its actions, to really address it at all.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are already limitations thanks to SB 382 from last year, that there are already limitations on what the Attorney General can do now in North Carolina. So now they're adding even more restrictions to what the Attorney General can do in terms of bringing lawsuits and fighting against actions of the General Assembly.
Yeah.
So they are trying to take the Council of State check on the law out of the equation. They want to make the Attorney General a legal arm for the NCGA, not the actual executive legal, attorney for the state. So it's a weaponization of law that is just so egregious. It makes my blood boil a little bit.
Not saying. And I want to take a second and talk about the fact that, one, in my opinion, they did this because they got pissed that he signed on to a lawsuit by multiple states attorneys general to go after the birthright citizenship executive order that Trump signed.
Mm-hmm.
They got pissed about that, so they're trying to do this as punishment. But another aspect of this is, obviously, the more attorneys general you have signed on to a lawsuit, the stronger it is, the more support it it has. So this is people on a state level trying to help out Trump on a national by trying to neuter the Attorney General's office in North Carolina.
Yeah. So even if he wanted to sign on to these lawsuits that all these other attorneys general would sign on to, he legally, by the law of North Carolina, would not be able to.
Yeah, and it's not. Here's the thing. What gets me is obviously this is specifically talking about anything Trump does. He can go after, I don't know, tobacco companies like some have before, for example, in lawsuits. He can go after, other organizations in lawsuits. It's just specifically you can go after the president's executive.
Absolutely ridiculous. Yeah.
Absolutely insane. And trying to remember who interest one. Because I think
that was I know one of them was Bobby Hainick.
Yeah, let me look this up because I feel we need to call these people out by name. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Senate Bill 58. This was the primary sponsor is Moffitt. How do you say his name? Hainig?
Yeah, Hainig.
Settle, Ford, Heiss, and Sorry.
Yeah, Benton Sorry.
Yeah. Like those are the people, those are the senators that and ask what the hell are you?
Yeah, the precedent for this is not. It is not good.
Yeah, no, it's not. The other two bills are on the House side that we're going to talk about. So first one is House Bill 66, H66. So this amends the general statute concerning early voting procedures so that the early voting period is reduced to start not earlier than the second Monday before an election, which a voter seeks to vote, and not later than 3 p.m. on the last Saturday before that election. Currently, early voting period begins not earlier than third Thursday before an election in which a voter. Adrian, would you like to condense that down really quick?
They want to give you 6 days to vote early, and that's it.
6.
That is all you get. Not counting the weekend, not counting a Sunday, and they're going to cut the time that you would be able to vote early on Saturday by 2 hours. So if you have work on a Saturday and you get off at 4, tough luck.
Yeah.
Sorry, you didn't get there on time, because now the law says that you're only allowed to early vote for 6 days the week prior to an election.
Yep.
So cutting it down by half, essentially.
Yeah. And let me just say really quick, the primary sponsor on this is a relatively new guy, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Paul Scott. He has had one term in the House. He is the rep for Cleveland and Rutherford County. Rutherford County is where I grew up. So real great representation. I love that. So this guy, Kidwell, Tyson, Gable.
Keith
Yeah.
I should have known it was Keith Kidwell.
Almond, Biggs, Branson, McNeely, Penny, Pike, Strickland, Ward, White, and
Bill Ward. I should have known it was freaking Bill Ward.
So those are the people who have signed on to House Bill 66. So these are the people who want to execute Order 66 and reduce your opportunity to vote. And that is absolutely, we in this country need to make it easier for vote, not harder. And the whole point of this is and we see this happen on national level and state levels all the time. The whole point of this is simple, and it's to disenfranchise voters, because these people don't want you to be able to choose your representative. They want to choose their voters. They want to make it to where, working class people who can't afford to take time off can't get to the poll. They want to make it to where people of color who historically have had so many damn roadblocks put in front of them to vote can't get to the fucking poll. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. No,
I should be getting worked up.
You should be. Yes. You should all be getting worked up.
Everyone listening to this episode should be getting worked up about this.
It's like I said, it's so innocuous, right? It just seems like it's the item of the day kind of thing, that they're just going to vote on it. And like, you saw how many sponsors are on that bill. This is something they want to pass. There is a plan in place to eliminate early voting in North Carolina and across the states. It's slowed down quite a bit because of this last election. I think Republicans finally caught on that, we do actually have early vote, like people that would vote early as Republicans. So they've eased up on it a bit, but never mistake that these people, if given the chance, would absolutely take it away completely. If they could wave a magic wand, they would 100%.
Because we see more and more of a growing call in super circles, maybe not even super conservative, but just conservative circles, for voting to be one day and one day out.
Oh yeah, this is a very popular Sorry.
There's no real call for, election day to be a federal holiday. Nothing, right? There wouldn't be any plans in place to make sure that every voting site is staffed adequately, has the stuff they need, et cetera, et cetera. There's nothing in place for that because they don't care. They don't want to.
No, they have a bootstrap mentality about it because, you talk to some of these conservatives, they will tell you, oh, well, that's just too bad. Maybe you should have planned better. Maybe you should have worked harder. Maybe you should have made sure you had off that day. All these excuses. And meanwhile, you're like, well, don't you think it'd be better if you gave people more opportunity to do that? No, the logic is so backwards, but it doesn't matter because as long as they have the feeling that they can win on election day, that is what they are going to continue to do. It doesn't matter how many. There was an old adage: as long as you can get the apples, it doesn't matter how many apple trees you cut down. So don't expect that because for the sake of democracy or for the sake of liberty or for the sake of the Constitution that they want to keep the apple trees in place. Hey man, as long as we're winning, it doesn't matter. I can take those apples and I can plant new trees. I don't give a damn about your trees. Yeah. Sorry, random metaphor, but you get my point.
Yeah, no, I do.
So what's that last bill?
Yeah, so this is House Bill 64. Now, strap in this one. It's a lot, but just stick with seconds.
This one's a doozy.
So House Bill 64, H6, subject to approval by voters at the statewide election on November 3rd. So remember that part. Amends Section 5 of Article 3, the governor's clemency powers of the North Carolina Constitution as follows. Limits the governor's clemency power to instances where a person has been convicted and their sentence has commenced, makes clemency subject to the approval of a majority of each house of the General Assembly, was subject to regulations relative to applying for pardons, requires the governor to reconvene the General Assembly if clemency is granted when it has adjourned sine die or for more than 30 days. Specifies that if the governor does not reconvene the General Assembly, the grant of clemency fails. If approved, this would be effective upon certification by the State Board of Election. That was a lot there, but, Adrian, I'll let you take it away while I look up the sponsors.
I can sum it up in like 5 or 6 words. Neuter the governor's pardon power. Take away the ability to preemptively pardon, to pardon without somebody actually having been tried and gone to jail or anything like that. The entire point, and this is just from a baseline constitutional law perspective, the entire point of the executive power of pardoning is to be a check on the courts and the state house and senate. It's the same way at the presidential level. People might not like pardons, and I understand why they don't. People didn't like it when Biden did it, and people didn't like it when Trump did it. But here's the thing. I unequivocally understand the purpose of it being there, and it is to be a check on the legislative and the judicial branch. That's why it exists. So if you take that away from the governor, once again, these all seem to have a common theme, don't they? This is yet again the General Assembly of North Carolina attempting to neuter the other levels of executive or judicial power and place it firmly in the hands of themselves. Oh, you want to pardon that guy? You better get our permission first. Hey, excuse me, that's not how this works. Oh, really? And then they pass a bill and saying that's how it works.
Yeah.
Give it 15 years, give it 20 years down the line. It's just normal now.
Yeah. And just so y'all know who all has sponsored this, so the primary sponsor is Brian Echevarria. He is a new rep out of Cabarrus County. Looks like his district is just a little south of Concord, just outside of Charlotte. But he's the primary sponsor. And then you have Mike Clampett, Setzer, Brody, Kidwell. There he is again.
Kidwell again.
Loftus, Ward again.
Yep.
Willis, and Winston.
You're gonna see a lot of these types of bills in the House are going to be sponsored by Keith Kidwell and a relatively new guy to the scene, Bill Ward. This is I have a very specific hatred of Bill Ward, not just because I ran the campaign against him, but he is part of that group of MAGA Republicans that will do whatever it takes to win. So he is a very dangerous man. Doesn't matter that he's 74 and that he's from the one of the most remote House districts. He will do what it takes. So stay aware. And all of this kind of follows a thread, doesn't it? It really all seems like it's the same theme of the type of governance and the type of policy positioning that Republicans have.
Exactly.
Yeah, you had a great, or you have a great term for that somebody
Yeah.
else mentioned.
So, what you're seeing on a state level and on a national level, especially, is what Steve Bannon, and I'm not saying this to give him credit because he's, absolutely awful.
I mean, hate the player, but
I mean,
hate the game too. I don't know.
I will
He's a good
gladly hate
player.
the
He's a
player.
good player.
He is, but I will gladly hate him. Anyway, he calls what Trump is doing with all these executive orders and whatnot flooding the zone. So the whole idea is, think about like you're out in the ocean and you're bobbing along and you're trying to get to shore, or you're trying to get out, and you're just hit by wave after wave after wave, and you are not making any progress whatsoever in your goal at all. Every time you think you get half foot out, another wave comes and hits you and drags. That's what this whole thing is. It is designed to keep on hitting you and hitting you and hitting you. All these terrible executive orders and all these absolute batshit crazy, things that are being said and done by Trump and by, elongated muskrats, all his crew. And it's just to wear you down and make you give up. It's designed to drain your energy.
Yeah, or to distract your energy. You start fighting against things that they never plan to actually win, and then they do, or maybe, sometimes they do, and they are shocked that it actually won.
No, they are. And I mean, don't get me wrong. What is being done right now on a state and national level, especially national, is absolutely absurd and incredibly dangerous, especially if you're someone who knows your history and has studied history and has studied the rise of authoritarianism and dictatorships and whatnot. Not saying this to, try to make you go, oh my God, but to make you aware of what's happening.
Yeah.
We are watching, someone let his, I don't even know if you call him his second in command or what.
No, he's letting a billionaire oligarch control him.
Yeah, no, he is. But he's also letting that billionaire oligarch get into sensitive information. Like, everyone listening to this right now, everyone on this recording, you, me, our data is absolutely compromised at this point. Musk and his little muskrats have social security numbers. They have all this information.
Yeah, they've threatened to stop the flow of funding for numerous organizations.
Yeah. And here's the thing. If you are Trump and you have someone who is willing to do your bidding, no matter what, you can get away with whatever the hell you want. You can do away with checks and balances without even having to change a single line in the Constitution. Hitler took over Germany and turned into a dictatorship using the Constitution in 54 days, I think.
Yeah, 54 days. And here's the thing. We're seeing the rise of fascism is not just something that we've been sounding the alarm bells about, because it's like, oh, we signed and here's the things that are happening. But it's the pattern of recognition. And one thing that Hitler did, that Mussolini did, that Franco, that many like Stalin and all of these people have done throughout history, they didn't ask permission. They just did it. This wasn't something that went through the legislative process and got approved. If they want to do it, they'll just do it. And we're seeing those kinds of tendencies with Musk right now, where they're just straight up barging into places and demanding for the thing. They're demanding resignations, they're demanding all the data, they're demanding all of the records, they're demanding access that they should not have access to. And then when it comes time for people to push back against it, they're like, hey, you're not allowed to do that. They are full on going with the age-old adage, ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Yeah.
They're not going to ask permission. So
No,
don't expect them to. And you think Trump's going to stop him?
No, he wants this to happen. He wants the chaos. He wants, the distraction so that he can get away with whatever he wants to do.
Trump just made billions of dollars off of his crypto pump and dump scheme.
Yeah.
He does not care.
No.
One bit.
He doesn't. Because let's be real, and let's just, say what we've known for years. Trump does not give a shit about you. He does not give a shit about me. He does not give a shit about this country. The only person he cares about is himself. The only thing he cares about is enriching himself, increasing his power, and keeping himself out of jail.
Yeah.
He will do whatever it takes to do that, whether it is, tearing down the systems of checks and balances that make up our country, whether it's giving, the keys to the asylum to the inmates high on ketamine, whether it means literally taking the Constitution and wiping his ass,
Yeah.
he will do whatever it takes. He does not care.
No, they don't care.
And we have a Congress that is dominated by Republicans and a Supreme Court that doesn't care because, well, they see Trump, one, as a useful idiot who can help advance their own goals. Also, why should they stop him?
Hey, man, they have job security.
Yeah, exactly.
and they're unfortunately, well, unfortunate for us, fortunate for them, they're on the winning side.
Yeah.
But I do think we're sort of ending this on a dour note, and I don't necessarily want to end it on a dour note right before we're going to talk to Dalton. So I want to end this with something that we tend to do a lot on this podcast, which is to plea to people that are our age or younger, that if you're sick of these dinosaurs being feckless and just completely incompetent, do something about it and start acting now, because it's never too early. You're never too young to start affecting change. And I think Dalton is a really good example of that.
He is.
So we're going to hear from him. Keep in mind that politics is never set in stone, and sometimes you got to ride out the wave and you got to know how to float, but never be afraid to fight.
Never.
So with that, I hope you will stick around with us for this interview. Dalton George, the Mayor Pro Tem of Boone, North Carolina. Thanks so much for listening to us yap at the first part of this. So enjoy.
Today on this episode, we actually have a special guest, our first time having one. So this is Dalton George. He is the Mayor Pro Tem of Boone, North Carolina, so western part of the state, home of Appalachian State University. And yeah, I thought I'd just kind of give you all a little overview of how this particular interview came to be. So, and Dalton, please stop me if I get any of these details wrong, but...
No, go ahead. You're doing great.
But, Dawn and I, we met probably 2017-ish, 2018?
Yeah. It's been a while. Yeah. Nearly a decade.
Yeah, which makes me feel so old. But, him and I, we both kind of started working with the Watauga County Democratic Party and just kind of went from there. Both of us went to App State. We were both students there and, graduated. And I know, Dalton, you kind of stuck around and did a couple of things. So what can you tell us about that, your kind of journey? I know you were on city council. I know you're currently Mayor Pro Tem. What all is that like?
Yeah. I just couldn't quit the place after graduating. I'd find whatever way I could to stay around. As you remember, I was kind of involved in the county party and was doing a lot of activism through the city council, the town council, and introducing ordinances really related to tenants' rights. And kind of hit this point in my life, was about to graduate and talk to a couple of people who lived here. And, the transient nature of a college town was there was a lot of fights getting started, but there wasn't a lot of folks able to see it through. And I really kind of had this realization. I wanted to try to be that person. And, one thing led to another, originally applying for a vacancy on the council and then running and winning election. And then recently was reelected in 2023, which is what ended up making me Mayor Pro Tem. But, it's been a learning experience. Politics up here in Watauga is a blood sport. You'll remember that, CJ. I always joke around that the Watauga County Democratic Party is a Spartan model of political organizing. They kind of put you out on the cliff, and if you don't live through the night, it is what it is. And that was definitely my introduction into paid political work. And for good reasons. I think it prepared me for a lot. And then, and naturally kind of gravitated towards public service in a number of ways, activism, and then into elected office. So it's been good. Mayor Pro Tem is interesting. It's vice mayor. And every time you introduce yourself as Mayor Pro Tem, usually people go, oh, you're the mayor. It's kind of like the office assistant to the assistant manager or whatever the joke is. But it's nice. I enjoy it. And I still get a vote on council. Our mayor doesn't. So it's the best of both worlds.
All the prestige and all of the risk, maybe?
Yeah. Yes.
Has less risk then. But that's all really interesting. Now, Dalton, I think just for context, everybody needs to know how old you are.
Yeah. Okay. I'm 25 years old. So when I first got started in all this crazy business, I was the youngest office holder in the state when I first got that vacancy and was appointed. And, nobody told me that holding a title for being the youngest isn't that great because you get older, right? Should have known about that. And so I've since lost it to some amazing youngins across the state. I'm somewhere on the scoreboard, but I've kind of quit taking count. I just say I'm one of the youngest, but yeah, I'm 25 years old.
Well, and I bring it up, not to highlight your age necessarily or that you are, in fact, getting older, but that, there are lots of young people around the state and nationally that feel as though they can't get involved or can't run for things because they're not old enough / experienced enough.
Right.
Yeah. You certainly don't feel that way, it seems.
No, I mean, and I love that question. Anytime I get asked, a question in that way, Adrian, I always say that, obviously we have more to lose. That makes sense, but it's incredibly easy to have an impact on a community, especially in rural areas. I always joke that, I'm not the smartest person in the town of Boone, and I'm definitely not the most educated. I don't come from a blue blood background, but I worked really hard. I mean, I saw what I didn't like in this town, and I just started going to meetings and making public comment, talking to my neighbors at my rental complex that I was frustrated with the property managers and organizing them. And it was through that kind of dogged determination that I did end up getting some experience that I think translated really well to holding office. And it didn't take a lot of revolutions around the sun to do it, right? Like it was just through talking to the people in my community that were dealing with these issues. And that was really profound. I mean, in a lot of ways, when I was running, I felt like one of the most qualified candidates because I, served on a town board and towns are always looking for people to serve on advisory boards. I had, introduced ordinances that were passed as an activist. And again, it wasn't through any sort of like, oh, I've got a law background. It was just seeing something that I really wanted to tackle. And that was profound. And I always tell young people that I'm like, yo, if you're thinking about running for office, if you want to hold public office, where I always recommend people start is just doing the work, right? Whether it's volunteering on a campaign or organizing locally with a nonprofit, I think that shows a level of credibility and it kind of allows you to move away from your age a bit. Now, that's not to say, folks, I mean, I always kind of get like, I remember when I was running, I had a couple of people try to explain to me very basic things like, oh, you need to know a lot about zoning if you're running. You can't just be this youngin' with your hair on fire. And at the time I was serving on our like planning board, right? So I was like, I get that, dude, but you get that. But overall, I think it made it to where it was less about my age and more like, hey, I'm the renter that's renting alongside y'all and dealing with these issues. Hey, I'm the guy that served on the board, and I'm the guy that's introduced things as a citizen. So yeah, it was nice and doable. I mean, if I can do it, I think a lot of people can.
What do you think has been the most surprising thing about both running in such a rural area and then seeing the town grow and then being in charge?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most surprising thing about running in a rural area or a small town is, and this is true for really politics in general, but the perception people have of you is often so far from the truth, either for good or bad, right? I mean, I meet some people that think I'm like boy wonder and I can solve everything, right? Never meet your heroes. And I meet some people that are like, oh my God, you were public enemy number one, and now I'm talking to you and you're incredibly reasonable, right? And this like problem solver. And it's funny in that way. So I think recognizing that, in this public, especially in a small town, people are going to talk, people are going to have a perception of you. And really just through getting things done, that's how you improve it, through being accessible in the community. But that's something I think everybody encounters when they run or do something public. The growth of Western North Carolina is a whole other story. I mean, it's tough. I actually recently, this is the first time I'm saying this publicly, but I'm like in the process of trying to buy a house here. And I'm in closing, which is huge. But Boone's like one of the most expensive areas really in the state. I mean, we have such limited housing stock. And it was a really heartbreaking experience because I'm buying from an investment company that bought from an heir, of a longtime family, and obviously paying a lot to do that. And, I could move outside of the town. I could move to a more rural area that doesn't have these growth pressures from out of state and from more metropolitan areas and really thrive. But I'm committed to this place. I want to live here. And so it's financially less efficient for me to do so, right? To put roots down here. And that's tough. Like, being young and holding office in a town that's growing, that's got people from out of state moving here and so on and so forth, just a ton of growth, a lot of investment. It displaces people. And when you're somebody that's not resourced like I am, right? You're just a regular guy. The prospect of putting down roots is really scary.
Yeah, understandably so. I mean, I imagine, especially after just everything that's happened with Hurricane Helene and whatnot, which I might like to get to here in a minute, but One thing I was kind of curious about, you mentioned, some people from out of state and, the town being what it is. What is it like, or I should say, again, like I said at the beginning of this interview, for folks listening, Boone is home of Appalachian State University. So it has, I think like 20,000 or no, not 20,000. How many students does it have? About 20,000?
Yeah, you're right on the money.
Yeah. So what is it like, one, I guess being an alumni of App State, but what's it like also being, Mayor Pro Tem of Boone, the city it's in? How do you kind of, reconcile those two things? What's that like? And how do you kind of interact in an official capacity with the university?
Yeah. Excellent question. I mean, I'll say this, right? And I'm going to torch the General Assembly early. Y'all are going to be like, dang, Dalton, let us get there. But,
we are not, you'll find very quickly, we're not scared of making our positions on certain people. So,
okay. Well, I'm in good company. I mean, the Board of Governors is really bad. I mean, that's the heart of it, right? I mean, at a point very recently, the General Assembly appointed people that viewed higher education in the state that used to be a state-of-the-art flagship system where people across the country would travel to try to emulate, and they turned it more into a business, right? Heads in beds equals success, educational attainment, classroom size, that type of stuff is less important. And obviously we want our public universities to grow because we want people to be able to attend public universities, right? But at the same time, like, it has to be intentional growth. It has to be growth in partnership with the town. And really, the university's been a pretty bad partner. This new interim chancellor's been a lot better. I will say that. I'm hoping that she gets the full-time job. Now, the town's not included in even that hiring process, which I think is kind of offensive, Nobody's even been consulted to serve on that committee, but Deanna Ballard, a former state senator, is on that committee. So it's kind of like, that's interesting. In terms of building relationships. But on top of it, I'll use this as an example. I say this till I'm blue in the face, but the General Assembly brings a lot of money to the university for growth, 200 million plus pretty much every budget. And the town gets about 2 to 3 million. I think this last budget, we got around 6 from the General Assembly. And when you really think about it, it's like, our public employees are the ones plowing roads so people can get to school. Our fire department is the fire department that services the university. The amount of students, they don't just stay on campus, right? I mean, that's stuff that the town uses. And obviously they generate economic success too. I mean, I'm not going to say I like the fact that we're a university town, but it's about good partnership. It's proportional investment in the communities that are dealing with a lot of these externalities that growth is creating. A really small example, when I tell people this, their minds are blown. We had to buy a $2 million fire truck to service effectively the dorms on campus that are bigger buildings than anywhere else in town. And we were not assisted for a number of years from the General Assembly, even though they're the ones that provide the funding to build those big buildings. And so it gets really maddening. It sucks because CJ, I know you're an Apple alumni too, and man, it's like I've got to the point where I almost root against our football team because I'm like, Lord, like it's so frustrating, and I want to be a proud alumni. And I mean, the faculty there are amazing, the professors, the student body is great, and obviously student athletes. I joke about the football thing. I mean, there's great human beings on that campus. I love the university, but the administration and the direction out of Raleigh has made it really hard to want to rep that. My grandma will get me App State pajamas every Christmas, and I'm like, Mama, I don't know if I'm going to wear these as much as you want me to. I'm a little mad at them right now.
I mean, I can't blame you for wanting to root against the football team. They've kind of made it easy this past season. Anyway, that's beside the point, though.
Yeah, that is interesting, though. This almost, because it has to be a symbiotic relationship at some point. And clearly it's not.
Right. Yeah. And and it's something that I hear about, from other public universities too. I mean, I've got friends on city councils and like a Chapel Hill and stuff, and they don't really feel super included in the process or the direction the university's taking. And so, it's not unique to App State. I think it's a little more difficult because, we're typically a Democratic council, and then we've got a Republican in the state house and state Senate. And that's not to say they haven't helped us in some ways. I mean, they have. And I mean, I'll definitely give them credit when they deserve credit. And there are things that I can point to that they have done and helped, but it makes keeping those channels open a little bit harder. And I think, Chapel Hill, where they can probably more reliably have a conversation with their state house rep about the direction.
Now, I was kind of curious, you mentioned kind of like town resources like fire trucks and, like EMS and all that stuff, which kind of makes me try to think of this as a good segue. Maybe it's not, I don't know, to what Hurricane Helene was like there in Boone, what you kind of saw on the ground, one as just a citizen of Boone, but also what you saw from the point of view of Mayor Pro Tem, of someone, kind of in charge of helping out with the efforts and whatnot. What was that like? What was that like? Because that is a very out of the ordinary situation.
Definitely, yeah. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to tell some of the story. I mean, I haven't told like kind of the whole thing, so I'll try to hit a lot of it. So it started. We kind of saw the hurricane coming. We knew that it was going to cause some damage, right? So our public works are out working ahead of time, clearing culverts. They're rock stars. I'm going to get to them later. But really kind of trying to mitigate possible kind of problems that we'd have that we couldn't get to during the storm. So clearing debris, that type of stuff. Now I'm in DC for work that Thursday, I believe, and I'm trying to get back. They cancel my train. I took a train up there, because of carbon output. So I get a rental car and I have to go to the train station in Greensboro to get my car and get back up the mountain. Talking to my dad, like, you shouldn't do that. It's already dumping rain. And I wanted to get back because I knew I'd never forgive myself if I wasn't there to be able to help in whatever way I can. And I'm not acting like I'm a rock star. I'm not EMS trained, but I've got two hands and, I can help somebody, bring somebody some water. And I knew I'd never forgive myself. So I hauled up the mountain, got in about 2 or 3, our driveway's already got a rut in it. It's pouring, but really the problem hasn't started. It's just dumping water. And then it evolved and you recognized how bad it was. I was obviously staying home for that first day because nobody could really get out other than emergency services. But as soon as the storm cleared, I really went to work on relief work. So I was bringing water and supplies to areas that were hit the hardest, trailer parks in our town, some multifamily complexes, checking on folks in that way. And it was heartbreaking. I mean, I was going into these trailers, bringing people water, and I was wearing my town council badge and it was so early in the process, we didn't even know what was going to happen. I didn't even have service. I couldn't even tell what was going on, what the coverage looked like, what the feds were saying they were going to do to help us. And it was a risk, because I didn't want to go in there and tell people I didn't have the answers, but I was pretty honest. I said, look, I want to show you that somebody that's in a position like this cares. And I don't really know what the road's going to look like from here, but I promise I'm to fight, hard for you to get the help that you deserve. And so that was a lot of it the first day or two. And, made sure folks were safe, got some people some life-saving medication. And then it evolved, right? Then it evolved into actually embedded with our planning staff. And so our planning staff, they were rock stars. Some of them were commuters into town, so it was hard for them to get there. And one of the ways that we could expand the services that our planning staff were doing in this damage assessment, this initial inspection period, was by pairing council members with a planner because they have to go out in pairs. And so I was pulling 14-hour days with our planning staff, going out into buildings, looking at damage, being there to support. A lot of it was just them having a body. They just needed somebody to be there with them for safety's sake. But it was surreal, and the days really blended together. I had no access to information. I had, we didn't get internet back for 4 or 5 days, and cell service was, you could get a text out every now and then. But I really just gave myself to that work and, kept my head down and we slowly improved. I think the town fared better than the west end of the county. Obviously the storm was a little further west, but, I think sometimes you'll have this attitude with Boone where they're like, oh, well, Boone looks okay now, so it wasn't a problem. But, folks see those pictures of King Street underwater and it's like, no, we got hit hard. We just had some folks, and not saying that other towns didn't work hard, but we had folks that were just real amazing at doing work before the hurricane, during the hurricane, and after the hurricane, to the point where we were back online with major services, within a week and a half, which is not the story of a lot of towns. And I guess the one thing I'll say too, the public works piece, I write a column for Beacon Media, and I wrote this piece recently about how the public works employees really impressed me. I know we saw a lot of feel-good stories about the firefighters and the police, and they were amazing too. But I think it just shows America's relationship with blue-collar labor, where these guys that have shovels and T-shirts are coming out there digging out culverts, removing debris in the middle of the storm, and the corporate hotels aren't offering them a free, right? But they are for the firefighter and the policeman. And I want them to do that for the firefighter and the policeman, but I also want them to do it for the public works employees. We had guys sleeping in vans, sleeping in the public works facilities, pulling, 24-hour shifts. And that was really incredible. And it really endeared me to their work in a way. I mean, I've always loved our employees, but I was like, y'all are my heroes. And a lot of my friends in the police department said the same thing about public works. They were like, these guys are rock stars.
It's interesting you bring up like just this blue collar, these guys who are clearing out culverts type of guys, and showing appreciation for them. And I mean, we definitely have a soft spot in the heart for like sanitation and water and all that stuff, like the non-sexy part of local government. But I am willing to bet, and this is not an indictment on them at all, I am willing to bet that they vote Republican most of the way, almost every time, as a lot of blue collar workers do. And my question is, as a Democratic area, as a Democratic town council, what are the kinds of things that you think can better ingratiate, that maybe the NCDP, or heck, if they'll listen to the National Democratic Party, could do to better ingratiate themselves to blue collar workers like them, so that they understand that the kinds of things that we advocate for actually serve to help them as well?
Yeah. Heavy question.
Yeah, it is.
I'll speak from personal experience, because and I don't know if this is the way you map it onto strategy, but I was talking earlier about the perception of being elected. When I first got elected, because I was young, because I was taking on landlords, the perception was I'm like this lefty that's unreasonable, right? Like, this anarchist, I'm going to destroy the town of Boone. I mean, that really was the perception. Sure. And there's a lot of raised eyebrows about me. And that's not to say that I'm not progressive. I make that clear to everybody. I don't hide that. I've introduced a lot of things that few other towns have. I view government as being an incredibly important part of helping working people, right? I mean, that's my foundation of my political belief. And I make that clear, but also, a lot of the staff that I have the best relationships with, and I don't know how they vote for sure, but I bet they do vote Republican. But it's just about relationship building. I get in there and I talk to these people, and they realize very quickly we grew up very similar. I'm in rural North Carolina. I grew up single parent family. My dad was a blue collar worker, right? I mean, that type of stuff. And just through talking and shooting the breeze with them, being funny. I mean, I genuinely, and maybe that's the answer, Adrian. It's like, I think we just have to be funnier. I really do think that's like, I think that's like the answer. I mean, working people don't want you to come to their door if you're the NCDP or the Democratic Party and talk about how bad life is. Because we get that. You know what I mean? Like, my dad didn't have insurance the whole time I was growing up. Nobody's knocking on his door and say, oh my gosh, it's so terrible not to have insurance. And this is, people are dying. It's like, they get that. They get that better than anybody else, how bad things can be, what it's like to, have a check bounce, what it's like to not be able to get important services, to skip a doctor appointment, a dentist appointment. They don't want to hear how bad things are. They want somebody that can show they can get something done. And they want somebody that can make life a little bit more enjoyable. I think humor is the way to do it. And so, the way I've always gotten along with the many Republicans in my town, some of which actually vote for me, right? Even though they know I'm a left, is through being funny and accessible. I think that's really the heart of it.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And it's something I've kind of talked about before, is that a lot of Democrats take themselves really, really seriously and try to push sort of a more dour message of like everything's falling apart, only we can save it kind of thing. And I'm sure that for a lot of people that doesn't work. And I think your approach is a really good one, of not necessarily just being more humorous, although that is definitely a benefit, a boon, if you will. Then you have you have this ability to connect with people. It's something that I think is missing from just the national feeling of politics right now as a whole.
It's
right.
It's a sense of sincerity. It's a sense of community and just, being normal, so to say. I say normal as in like, your everyday person, not coming from a place of superiority or that.
Right. And it's, I'll work hard to do it. I think y'all are right. I think it's the sincerity. I think it's showing that you're a real person. And there's so many stories I can tell during the hurricane where, I would introduce a moment of levity or just crack a joke or, just offer support, shake somebody's hand and just look them in the eye and tell them how much I appreciate them. Yeah, they'd see the mud on my boots and they'd know I was out there. There's one of my favorite firefighters. He was our emergency response captain. So this dude was working, like 24-hour shifts, like bags under his eyes. He was a real hero, and I love the dude to death. Again, I don't know how any of them vote, but this is a great example. And I'm covered in mud. I've got my hard hat. I've got my mud boots on, and I'm in for one of the briefings, and he comes in and he's up there at the podium giving a briefing to staff, and he sees me dressed that way and he points, he's like, "Look at you, man," and busts out laughing. I mean, and it's just that rapport. I think folks really do see that I try my hardest, and I'm just out there. I'm willing to do whatever I would ask anybody to do. That's part of it. I guess a quick aside on the being funny and being genuine. It's we have a lobbyist for the town of Boone. A lot of folks do, and there's a couple of people in the General Assembly that dislike me because I'm pretty frank, and it makes my lobbyist's job harder, which I get. And he went to kind of tell me, "Hey, man, you got to start behaving." And I kind of lit into him. He's now somebody I admire, but I said, "Look, I know what people say about me in Raleigh. I know what the other party says, that I'm young. I don't know how the world works. That I'm this lefty, the silver spoon, whatever they say." I said, "I know, and I want you to know I resent that." That's exactly what I said. And I told him a little bit about how I grew up, and I told him a little bit about who I was and what I believed. And by the end of that conversation, he was like, "You know what? I'm so glad you told me this. I'm going to try to get things ironed out." I mean, it was less about reprimanding me and more about, okay, there was this perception of this guy because he's a Democrat, because he's progressive, because he's young, that if you sit down and listen to him talk about who he is and what he comes from, you realize very quickly that you're shadow boxing. The person you hate isn't even real.
Yeah. These scarecrows are put up to make it seem like all Democrats, all progressives are this way. But I think you're a living example that that's not the case. And that's good to see. The quicker we break down these kinds of barriers, the better it'll be. Also, I do think it's funny that pretty in character for a lobbyist to just plead with you to play ball.
Right. And that's the dynamic I think a lot of progressive city councils are having to contend with is, we want appropriations, we want funding from the General Assembly, and we're outspoken. I mean, there's a connection, and it's, what does that balance look like? What does it look like going to bat for your people and also trying to get funding for projects? And I think I've struck a balance. I mean, y'all can look at my Facebook and see me criticizing the General Assembly, but I think I've got to a place where I've found that balance. We'll see what we hear in the future.
Well, so while we're, talking about the General Assembly, I was kind of curious, just from your experience as Mayor Pro Tem and, living in Western North Carolina, what is there any dream bill, so to say, that you'd love to see go through the Journal?
Yeah, I mean, I got that kind of discussion topic early for you, and I really thought about it. I was in bed last night thinking what would be my dream bill? And there's so many things I'd say, and this might be a cop out. Y'all might roll y'all's eyes at this, but I think it would hammer on a lot of things I want to do that are my mini dream. And that's, some sort of home rule push, probably be a constitutional amendment, more local control in our communities. And we've seen with these recent Senate bills that remove towns' ability to zone and control what's going on in their jurisdiction, the limitation of rent control, the ability to tackle bad landlords in any real way. I mean, environmental, plastic bans, things like that. All these things are preempted. And the thing that kills me, y'all, is I hear all these people talk about small government parties, and there is not a party in Raleigh, let's make it very clear, that believes in a local community's ability to govern. And if you call that small government, which to me, it seems pretty apt, right? Then there's not a party that believes in that. And if anything, the party that claims to be small government is actually continuously and maliciously taking rights away from local governments to legislate. And so what that does is, when I'm in the grocery store and somebody comes up to me and tells me they're having to move because the rent's too high and their landlord maybe isn't repairing, whatever the case may be, and they're giving up on this place, I have to look at them and say, well, some joker in Raleigh 20 years ago wrote a bill that said the town can't do anything about rent. Right. And I have to have that conversation. And that's incredibly frustrating. And I will say Democrats, they were on board with some of these things too. I mean, I won't give them a pass. Right. But I would love to see a conversation in Raleigh about what does home rule look like in North Carolina? What's the appetite there? And the thing is, Republican legislators in small towns want that. I mean, the ramifications of this Senate bill that's taking away local control, that impacts Republican communities too.
There is a definitely an opportunity for bipartisanship there. Absolutely.
Right.
But and I'm not rolling my eyes. I actually agree that I think that would be a great thing to see pass, but I am, of course, skeptical because you're asking the General Assembly to give away some of their power. So,
Right.
yeah, I think it's a good answer. That is definitely a dream bill, unfortunately, right now.
And probably forever.
Yeah.
Well, I sure hope not. We've got a couple minutes left, so Dalton, wanted to ask you, what is your go-to cookout order?
Yeah, maybe the hardest question of the day. Okay, so don't judge me. I do cheese quesadilla. I don't know why, but I like the cheese more than the chicken. So I hit the cheese quesadilla, Cajun fries, the classic, honey mustard chicken wrap, cheer wine to drink. That's my classic. And there's some variations, but the sides are always going to be Cajun fries, honey mustard chicken wrap. You don't move off of that.
So let me ask you a little follow up with that then. What's your cookout milkshake then?
Okay, oh no, I don't know. I might lose my next election in a landslide.
This might be
I'm not like a
judgy
huge
one.
milkshake guy.
Oh man. All right, well that's the end of this interview. Goodbye.
Not even like the summer fruity one. Water.
No, if I get ice cream there, I'll do like the cheer wine or root beer float. That's it for me. I think.
So you're a big cheer wine.
Cheer wine all the way. Yeah. Well, not even really drink soda unless I'm like going to a cookout. So I gotta go big.
Okay.
Fair enough. That's fair enough.
Well, I certainly hope that didn't cost you your next re-election. And no, but thank you for the answer. My daughter loves the cheese quesadillas, and that's about the only thing that she will eat from cookouts. So you won her vote at the very least.
Okay, good taste. Yeah.
But Dalton, it has been really, really good having you on today. I feel like if our listeners learn anything, it's that young people can make a difference. Don't define yourself by your age. And the roadblocks that we put up are often in our own minds. And, pride and prejudice can get the best of us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thanks for having me on, y'all. CJ, it's great. Have a little Watauga reunion and enjoy the show. Listen to a couple episodes before coming on. So excited to see what else y'all release.
Well, thank you. And where can people find you?
Oh yeah. So Dalton for Boone on Instagram, and Facebook, and then it's John Dalton George on Twitter. And it's John without the H. It's not confusing enough to have three first names. We also have to spell. So, yeah. And that's where I'm usually at. Shoot me a message or something, and we can definitely chat.
Well, thank you for coming on today, Dalton. As our current president of the United States would probably say, keep an eye on Dalton. He's a comer. So we'll keep an eye on you, and hopefully that, like, further down the line, I hope that your run in politics does not end just as the mayor pro tem. We would like to see you do more further down the road. I'm sure that CJ would agree with me.
Oh yeah, well, most definitely.
Well, I appreciate that, y'all. And then I guess I'd be remiss if 2025's municipal elections. My term's not up, but I guess am I allowed to do a little plug real quick about local elections?
Plug away, please do.
Okay, cool. I know we were winding down, but you're talking about the president, you're talking about the federal government and our General Assembly, that we're just being let down left and right. I tell people, I think a strong local government really could be kind of an umbrella against a lot of the mess that's coming out of Raleigh and Washington. And, now more than ever, if you've been thinking about running, if you have somebody in your community that you want to run, if you want to get involved on a campaign, I think 2025 is the year to do it. That's how we build out a bench of people. That's how we get strong local policy that protects our folks. I'll use the non-discrimination ordinance we got passed here in Boone as an example, right? I mean, we get so distressed in what's going on in Raleigh and Washington. We can do things locally to protect our neighbors and our community. It just involves getting involved. So, that's a quick plug, and that's all I got.
No, thank you for the plug, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you, and like you said, nice little Watauga County Dims reunion right here. Let's not wait a few years before we do this again.
Amen, brother. Well, appreciate y'all. Take care.
Yeah, thank you, Dalton. Once again, we want to thank Dalton for coming on the podcast. It was a great time, and of course, like we say, go and look him up on everything and follow him. And in the meantime, make sure to follow us and subscribe, because we are definitely going to have more guests on the podcast very, very soon. So, make sure to stick around for that.
Oh, yes. And just remember to take any action that you can right now. Run for office, use your voice however you can. And also, as a side note, let us know what you think about this episode. Let us know what you think about the interview and this whole format.
Yeah, comment your vitriol at us on YouTube or slander us on Facebook. Clip our stuff out of context and post it onto Twitter. Whatever you need to do to make sure that people understand that what we're trying to do with this podcast is to help North Carolina, especially young progressives, Democrats, liberals, leftists, have a voice. Let's come together and stay on the left of Old North. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time.